men need to feel connected to other men and have trust in men and actually like have a love for men. I think prior to that, there's always like men, like obviously I had male friends, but it was more superficial. Like it was difficult to get deep. And it wasn't until MKP that I was able to build, deeper relationships with men.
Welcome to Third Culture Therapy, a podcast that looks at the unique ways our social identity and cultural heritage impact our mental and emotional well-being. I'm Leila Maghrabi, writer, journalist, and host of this show. Welcome to the show, dear listeners. This episode is one where we delve into the world of men, their feelings, and some of the social and cultural limitations they face in talking about them. My lovely guest Omar talks about building businesses, silencing the inner critic, and how joining men's talking circles have been a game changer for balancing his own emotional and mental health. But first, let me give him a proper introduction. Omar Lababedi is a British Syrian entrepreneur who was raised in France, Syria, Lebanon, and Nigeria. A proper third culture kid, he moved to London when he was 21 and has lived in the UK capital on and off ever since. After a career in real estate investment in Europe, he worked in the construction sector before going on to co-found Growth Velocity Academy, an international tech academy operating across several cities in the Middle East, which he has recently left, on good terms, I might add, and is currently exploring his next business venture. Omar, thank you for joining me today on this podcast. As I just mentioned,
thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. As I just mentioned, you have just left a business that you founded and worked in for 4 years, was it? You built it up over 4 years?
Yeah, 4.5. I was with them, but yeah.
So going straight in there, how do you feel about being a free man? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in between?
That's a good question to kick off because it's quite present to where I'm right now. I'd say I officially stepped away 4 weeks ago, and so things are still relatively fresh. Having said that, I have been in the process of leaving for a year now. I feel quite excited that I have the time now to focus on something that maybe excites me a little bit more than what we were doing in the previous business.
Starting a business, though I have not done it myself, is known for being incredibly hard, as well as incredibly rewarding, or so I've been told. How was the experience for you? And do you feel any sort of sense of loss having invested so much time in growing something and leaving it behind? Is it daunting for you now, being at a stage where you've sort of left something that you built? Or are there other things that you are sort of excitedly skipping towards?
So I'd say I feel really proud of the work that we did. I've been trying to get on this entrepreneurship bandwagon for maybe 6-7 years now, and I've dabbled with it. I started an e-commerce business in Syria back in 2009 when the country, it was very early days. I've tried more traditional types of businesses in the Middle East as well. And it wasn't until GVA till I felt like, actually, we've actually built a business that is quite aligned with my values, that, has a positive impact on people's lives, whilst also being successful, which is a rare thing. And so I'm really, really proud of that. And I had a really good relationship with my co-founder and the whole team. And I believe we built a beautiful culture. Obviously, leaving your baby is bittersweet. First of all, I think I have this habit of comparing myself to my co-founder. And since he was more experienced than I was when it comes to launching successful businesses, I always put him on a bit of a pedestal. which looking back now, I don't think was a very healthy dynamic. So what I'm most excited about now is actually cutting that umbilical cord and creating a bit of space so I can actually, build my own business without having to kind of fall back on someone. So what we like, our product last time was a digital marketing training, growth hacking training, which was amazing because it really helped people learn how to scale up their businesses. But what I'm much more interested in is mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and helping people really face their demons, not just on a mental level, but more on a somatic level, and to make real changes as opposed to just more like ethereal. Is that a word?
Ephemeral.
Thank you. Thank you. Ephemeral.
Yeah.
Changes. And so like that's I mean, that's the next venture that I'm hoping to launch. It's still early days.
Starting anything new is a daunting and exciting prospect. Venturing out solo is also both of those things. Like this project that I'm doing now, this podcast, is new and completely self-started, as is the book that I'm writing. And I've left a job that was within a company, secure, with a clear sort of path to do those things. And I did it out of choice because I wanted to, and I felt very passionate about what I'm pursuing. However, I can totally admit, and I should, given the topic of this podcast, that I have a lot of moments of mild panic and fear and self-doubt. And in the worst days, there's like a really bad critic in the room, with the room being my head, who is really showing me all the reasons why I've made a big old mistake. And I wonder, do you ever go through that? Like, do you have those fears and those doubts?
Yeah.
And also, is it helpful? Because, I mean, helpful is maybe a silly question to ask, but like traditionally, when we look at entrepreneurs, and they're all like really sort of super confident and very like believe in themselves and all like, yeah, I can do this, man. And sorry to put on this pseudo California accent, but you know what I mean? Like they're all very self-aggrandizing and self-believing. And I understand that's the case, but sometimes that makes me feel even more intimidated because I'm like, oh God, I'm not at that stage. Can you relate to that? Was that your experience from, even going back to when you first started your company?
100%. No, 100%. Like the inner critic is still very present, even though I have a successful business under my belt, right? But I think the way the inner critic works is it doesn't matter how amazing you have done. It'll always zero in on the 5% that you might have fallen short, and no one's perfect, right? We all tend to fall short, and then blows that bit up, and that's all you tend to focus on. That's what I tend to focus on. Now I think a way that I deal with that, and this is part of what I want to spend my time doing in the next venture, is helping people build healthy habits that help them stay ahead of their critic, or actually even make peace with their critics. Like, I don't think it's a battle. I think it's more of making peace with the critic, and almost and therefore better managing the critic, because the critic is like, for me, is my biggest Achilles heel, and the better I can manage that relationship, the better I will be able to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. And I think like a big part of this is just managing expectations too. So I mentioned habits, so I'll give you one habit that is non-negotiable for me. It's getting a workout in every day, even if it's just a walk in the park. But just getting out and moving my body is essential for my mental health. Obviously, sleeping as well as possible, and eating, good healthy breakfast, a good healthy lunch, and just staying hydrated. Like those are the obvious ones, right? But then I'd say in addition to that, I guess phase two would be, having like your favorite song on standby if you're feeling a bit blue, and just putting that on to kind of like get you out of that. Maybe meditating for 10 minutes, maybe doing some stretches, maybe some breath work. And then I'd say another thing that I do, and maybe we can call this phase three, and this is like having a steady practice where you get to check in with a support system. And so what I've got is, and this is something that I've only just rejoined after 5 years of leaving. I used to be part of something called the Mankind Project, which is a men's circle where you get initiated over 2 nights, 3 days. It's like a intense initiation for basically men's work. And men's work is basically helping men dive into their shadow, and typically shadow is the parts of our subconscious that we avoid, that we tend to brush under the carpet. And it's been one of the best things. It's once every fortnight for 2-3 hours we meet, and it's beautiful. I've got this community of incredible men to kind of hold space for me, and I hold space for them, and we kind of talk about the important stuff. And it's done in a beautiful structure where it's not just talking, we're actually embodying some of the work.
It's very rare, and this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on this podcast, is because you and I, as friends, we discuss a lot of different things to do with our emotions and our personal development and anxieties, etc. But it remains a rarity to hear men speak about these topics, and I would say even more so Arab men, right? And so I absolutely would love to hear more. I'm sure our listeners would too. So yeah, please, if you could say a little bit, like, what sort of things do you talk about?
Yeah. So maybe I'll just preface this by, so I'll give you one example. This happened just last week, actually. The first thing that needs to happen is that a container needs to be established. So basically a container is basically a safe space. And so that we have a couple of rituals that we do every time we meet, and they're beautiful rituals. And these are rituals based on mostly Native American teaching. And it involves maybe burning sage, cleansing the room, and then creating, like, we have a variety of rounds. The first round is known as the lover round. So the rounds are named after the 4 male archetypes, and which are lover, warrior, magician, and king. Those are the 4 main ones. So the lover round is basically an opportunity to just check in and to be seen and heard. And that's something that most men sadly don't have access to. I think unlike the ladies who love to chit chat and like open up and share, us men are more reluctant to do that. Or if we are to do that, we'll probably do it with our female friends or girlfriends or whatever. And so, like, MKP does a great job at actually providing men with the space to actually build healthy male relationships with other men. And I think that is crucial, because it's a different energy, and it's a different need. Once the lover round is complete, the warrior round is a chance to be held accountable. So I think another thing is, like, to feel like you're in integrity with, I'll speak about myself, to feel like I'm in integrity with myself, on look at myself in the mirror and feel like, you know what, I'm living out to be the man who I want to be. I need to feel like I'm doing what I say I'm going to do, right? And so as an MKP man, each man has his own mission statement, and we need to share what that. We need to remind the men what our mission statement is during the check-in session. And then when it's the warrior round, if there's something that I said I was going to do a couple of weeks ago and I fall short of doing it, I need to hold myself accountable. And if I don't, it's the duty of one of the other men to hold me accountable. So the warrior round actually has 3 rounds. The first is, each of us, and then it's the, them helping me or me helping them. And then the final one is if there's any charge in the room. If there's if I'm feeling a charge, like a negative charge with somebody else in the room, that needs to be cleared. And so
how does that happen? Just out of curiosity, does someone pipe up and say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit of bad vibes from you?
Yeah.
Is it like that?
Well, not exactly. So each round has a facilitator. Like we're in a circle, and then like men who don't have a charge step back, and we have to like literally like look at each other face to face and look in each one's eyes, and it's pretty intense because like how often do you have the guts to actually tell someone I've actually got beef with you, right? It's a very
rare,
and it's a very vulnerable place to be in, right? Most of us are very good at playing nice and hiding our true emotion. So it's an opportunity to really step forward and own that. And the more you can do that, the more I can do that, let me say, the more I'm able to like build like my own self-respect. That obviously also puts the inner critic back in his place too. So that's a crucial bit. So the third round is known as the magician round, and this is the round where I feel most of the real somatic work actually happens, which is what actually brought us into this conversation in the first place, right? So I'll give you an example of somatic work. So you want to basically shift energy that is stuck in your body as opposed to being stuck in your head repeating stories, right? And that is easier said than done, okay? Because human beings are very good at telling stories. And then she said this and he said that and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't really solve the issue. Don't get me wrong, I think talk therapy is helpful, coaching is helpful, but if you want to get to the root of the trauma, which is the birthplace of all shadow, you kind of need to shift energy in your body. And now MKP, like they have this process in the magician round where there are a variety of different techniques, but the idea is these techniques have been put in place to help men shift the energy in their body in order to release any toxic shadow. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So the king round, what tends to happen is we only have 2 hours and 45 minutes to do the whole thing. And so the king round just is almost like a closing round. How do you want to, how are you leaving the circle? So you just share your name and like a word typically of how you're feeling. Because after an experience like that, you feel extremely connected to these otherwise could have been strangers. Like I only rejoined the circle after leaving it for 5 years a few months ago, and literally after the first session, like the connection was so strong. I felt like, honestly, like on some level stronger, like deeper connection with them than people that I've known for maybe 20, 30 years. And it's because we're going straight into the real stuff. We're taking off all our masks.
This sounds amazing. And I'm so glad to hear how beneficial it has been for you. But I'm really intrigued, and I'm sure many others listening to it would be like, what took you there? What took you to MKP? How did you find it? Why did you go there? Why did you even feel like you needed it?
I'll probably start, I think, why did I end up there? I had spent a few years trying to figure out like who I was. And I tried to do that through work mostly. I used to work in property for a property fund, and as fun as that was, it wasn't really who I was. And I moved back to Syria, and I got involved with a few things over there in construction, and the revolution kicked off, and I ended up in Saudi Arabia. And I worked in construction in Saudi, and that was definitely not who I was. And so I ended up coming back to London, feeling a little bit lost, not knowing where I belonged, and where my career was even going. So I did a bit of traveling and came back, and I joined this thing called Escape the City. It was a career coach, and the career coach I really like what she taught really resonated with me. So I booked her in for a private one-on-one. And on the first session, she told me, dude, you need to do MKP. And I'm like, what is that? She said, well, it's this thing for men's work. And I initially was like, yeah, it sounds interesting, but maybe not for me. And a few months later, I was feeling quite low and I booked her in for a second session. She said, well, have you done the MKP thing? I was like, no. She's like, well, go do the MKP thing. Let's have a conversation. Thank God she said that, because that was a massive shift for me. Like I was saying earlier, my relationship with other men, because like men need to feel connected to other men and have trust in men and actually like have a love for men. I think prior to that, there's always like men, like obviously I had male friends, but it was more superficial. Like it was difficult to get deep. And it wasn't until MKP that I was able to build, deeper relationships with men. Yeah. So that's what.
What do you think your coach saw in you, or what did you see in yourself that led her to say MKP was the way to go? And
human beings, both males and females, are made up of both feminine and male energy, right? And there's mature male energy and immature male energy, and same thing with the female. And I think she could see that maybe my male energy was lacking. My mature male, I'd imagine that's what, because a mature male energy has direction, and I was lacking in direction. I was in my head. I was like, I've tried this, it doesn't work, and so I'd imagine that's why she asked me to do that. And I remember like on the last day, like I had literally like light shining out of my eyes. I was on another level, genuine game changer. And like off the back of that, maybe 6 months later, I built GVA, my tech academy. Like the universe not complied. I don't know if that's a word. It delivered. Inspired
to help you.
Conspired, that's the word.
You sort of tapped into, well, it sounds like you had this need for, as you say, for male energy and direction, and I'm sure there's a lot of deeper work that is involved in these sessions, but I know you, but for the purposes of the audience, you do come from a male heavy family in the sense that you are one of three brothers. You have two other brothers, and your father, who is still alive and well. Did you not have that sort of male directive energy from them, or was it not the kind that you were after?
Wow, okay, we're gonna go there. So my dad is an extremely generous man, but he also has his own ways of doing things, which I think conflicted with the way I wanted to live my life. Mostly in that, we have to do things his way, and whether we like it or not. And I think the issue with that is, like, at least in my case, I ended up initially trusting his advice and his guidance and ending up doing things that were really not for me, i.e. ending up doing construction in Saudi Arabia. Like, that just wasn't who I was. But I said, he's older than me, he's much more experienced, and he knows what's best for me. Therefore, I should trust him. And after a couple, like there were 2-3 instances where I kind of blindly followed his advice and ended up basically unhappy. I've had to really figure out also in terms of like how deep, like emotionally I am there's love 100%, but do we talk about the icky stuff? Definitely not. Do I wish? Yeah, but I've come to accept that this is the family that I'm born into, and I'll take what I can get. And I've got amazing brothers, an amazing father, and a lovely mother too. So I've been very, very blessed. but when it comes to like emotional support, I'd say it's limited. That's why I feel like I need to seek that from external, an external support system.
You mentioned that you followed your father's advice and recommendations, and it's quite common. Children, we want to often please our parents, and also naturally we look to them as guides, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Was there any challenge though, or difficulty in you forging this own separate way?
Well, actually, no. When I first launched GV, I remember my dad was like, "You're not going to make any money off of this. It's like, why don't you go work for XYZ or someone else that we know in Dubai who you'll get paid a lot more money." And I remember being quite firm with my boundaries there, which is a rare thing for me. I usually I let them cross most of my boundaries. And I was like, guys, listen, like, I'm doing this, whether you like it or not. So I'm building this company. Like, obviously, currently, now that I'm trying to launch a new business without my co-founder and doing this completely alone, like there's like, it's a double-edged sword, right? Part of me is like super excited. Another part of me is like, my inner critic pipes up and he's like, hey, can you do this without your co-founder or without another co-founder? And are you disciplined enough? And it's about really managing that in a healthy way. So the way I do that, because I know the personal development space quite intimately. I have a lot of friends that are coaches, or who work in men's work. A friend of mine, she's a coach, and I told her what I was going through, and like she gave me some great advice. And she basically said, dude, like, as long as you're following what excites you, you might not build $1 billion business, but at least you'll end up creating a career that is aligned with who you are. And that's exactly what I needed to hear, to be honest. Because if you ask me what's my biggest fear right now, it's ending up working for a business that I don't necessarily, I'm not aligned with, and I'm just doing it for the money. And that's my biggest fear. I think another crucial one is being realistic with how much one can achieve in a week or in a day. I think I used to have this tendency that I wanted to do way too much in one day and end up not achieving enough, and then resenting myself for that. And so now I'm a bit more chill. I'm like, you know what, dude, like, as long as you get these two main things done today, and that includes like a big workout, then you've done what needs to be done. I have weekly goals that I have weekly goals that I have actually a 5-year goal that I'm working towards, and I've broken that down into a 1-year goal, and I break that also down into weekly goals, and I check in with those goals every Sunday evening. What's one thing that I did last week that's going to get me closer to this goal, and what's one thing I'm going to do next week to get me close to that goal. And as long as I'm doing just that, checking in with those goals, I'm getting 1% better every week. I'm hopefully eventually I'll be able to achieve whatever goals I've set out to do, whilst also managing my mental health and emotional health in a healthy way.
Yeah, I understand that. That makes a lot of sense, and it's a good reminder for me on this day when my inner critic is a little bit louder than it should be, because I, similar to you, historically have been like, right, I have an idea, I want to do it, I get very excited, and I'm like, I'm going to do it in this time, I go in all guns blazing, and then you start getting into the work and you realize, oh, wow, there's actually a lot to do, and it might not happen as quickly. But instead of me looking at it like, yeah, things take time, I would just immediately beat on myself and be like, you're too slow, you can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And then, either leave it or do it, but really take all the joy out of it, because I'm now just kind of beating myself on the head because I'm not quick enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not progressing. And this year, I've really, in this past year, really been like, no, Layla, things take time. And actually, you have a goal and you have some plans and you know what you're doing. And you just have to understand that this is the pace, like this is life. Like it is one step at a time. And eventually these steps do become this whole big long journey that you've walked down, but you just have to keep going a little bit. And like you said, I like that, as long as you're 1% more than yesterday, then you're doing all right. And even some days when there's no movement, that's also all right, because
if you need to rest,
you need to rest. You hit a wall, sometimes you've hit a wall, right? And you sometimes do just need to take stock and be like, I actually have nothing today. There's no more juice left in the tank, and that's okay.
That's all right.
It's still difficult though sometimes. I don't know if you find that.
So I think I can speak to that. Actually, I think most of us know a lot of this intellectually, but physically, like I think this, and this is the work that I was alluding to earlier. It's about almost reprogramming your subconscious to believe what your conscious believes, and that is the hardest bit. We know what the steps are, but yet we still have these critical voices. This is what I'm learning. The way to reframe those voices is to really go in deep into your trauma, to feel all your emotions, and to, using a variety of different techniques, start shifting, the energy, all that pent up trauma. I've had this stuff in me for 42 years, and probably a lot of the stuff that I carry is intergenerational. It's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
But where do you just said you think they've existed even for hundreds of years? Where do you think this critic comes from? Like, where, if you've had it all your life, like what is it what are you measuring yourself against, or who has created this?
So when I say intergenerational, so I'll give you an example. So it's like I know that my father is very self-critical of himself, and he's also very critical of us, right? He doesn't tell us that he's critical of himself, but they say most critical people are firstly critical of themselves, right? And so I know that I've inherited that from the way he raised me, right? And I'd imagine that maybe one of his parents were quite critical. And that's what I mean by intergenerational, right? It's and I mean, God knows what happened when, like, he grew up during the Lebanese Civil War. His father died when he was, I think, only 14 years old, and he was the youngest of 7 kids, and he was the only son. So he had a lot of his own trauma. And I don't know what trauma my granddad had. But I can only imagine, like, he was around during the Great Famine of the Ottoman Empire. So, and they had to struggle and move to England and move to Nigeria and hustle. And so, it's intergenerational work, right? And the various formats one can access that. And this is what I'm only just learning now, is this is like having a daily practice.
So you've spoken a bit about this inner critic and also starting your own company. And that's, I suppose, having the fears around going your own way is universal. Do you think, though, that your cultural background has added anything extra to any sense of critique, worry, anxiety, or potentially helped?
So I'll start off with the positive. As I mentioned earlier, my dad is very generous, and I feel like he's always provided us with a safety net, right? So, like, worst comes to worst, like, we can always lean back on him. Now, it's something I don't want to be doing, but like, it's something that I know I always have. I think on the flip side, there's a lot of expectation. So it's not just, build a business and make some money. It's build a business, but build a real business where you're able to, earn a lot of money. And when I say, like, I mean, like, if you're not talking in millions, you're wasting your time. obviously, we all want to become millionaires, but the reality is sometimes when you're trying to build a career of purpose or, a social enterprise or whatever, like like, to me, it's really all about like getting that alignment with who I am and like actually trying to make a positive impact in the world. Obviously, I definitely want to make money, but for me, I think that's where the conflict arises sometimes with the expectations from the family. But that's a work in progress. And I, like I said earlier, I feel extremely blessed to have like a supportive family that allows me to go off and take these risks. Like, I think there are other entrepreneurs that actually don't have that safety net. And it makes things much harder for them. Having said that, sometimes the safety net actually ends up acting like a hindrance, right? Because necessity is the mother of invention. So again, that's another battle.
You've spoken about money, making money, sort of career success being an expectation within your family that seems like it's burdened you somewhat and maybe caused a little bit of inner struggle. Are there any other expectations, familial or cultural, that you feel have been difficult to deal with?
I'd say, so the one thing is this expectation to get married to a nice Syrian girl. And like, trust me, I've tried a number of times. And like, that's something that I genuinely love the Syrian culture, and I love like Syrian women, I have to say. And I love a lot about like our colloquialisms and our food and our history and just the way we are. But again, like, I feel because I'm not married yet, not even in a relationship at this stage, that I'm in some way falling short of the family and maybe even cultural, like society, like Syrian society's expectations of me as a single 42-year-old man. Like what's wrong with this guy? I feel the more I'm able to do, work on myself, the more I'm able to realize how relationships tend to be these dojos for acting out our shadow. Like, if you're in an intimate relationship with someone, in a real relationship, the relationship is going to bring out most of your shadow, and on both sides. And so therefore, the more one is able to know what they're like, be what's the word, self-aware, and also know how to communicate effectively in a relationship to use the relationship to actually become better people, as opposed to like point at each other and like hate each other. I think that's the beauty, and that's something that I'm very, very both curious about, but also like excited about. I can see myself ending up with somebody who also comes from a similar background, but also is quite self-aware and who's done some of the work, and who's willing to be in a conscious union, in a conscious relationship.
I think a lot of people, a lot of women in particular, will take solace in hearing that it isn't just them who are perhaps on the receiving end of a certain silent judgment about being single still at a certain age. So thank you for sharing that vulnerability. You've spoken a lot about what you've learned in years with Mankind Project, with the somatic work, with personal development, with coaching. Is there anything from your culture, given how tied and linked you are to it, that you have found over the years has helped you with your mental and emotional well-being?
A couple of things. First, I'd say is religion. I think when growing up, I felt like religion was shoved down our throats. We had to approach it from a place of fear. And I basically took a bit of a break from religion. I was always Muslim, but I just wasn't practicing. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I've kind of reconnected with Islam. And what I found is a lot of the teachings, I'd say most of the teachings in personal development are aligned with Islam. So whether it's meditation, prayer, like we meditate when we pray, whether it's, being present in, whether it's keeping a gratitude journal, that's what prayer is. You're thanking God and just thanking the universe for everything that you've got. 5 times a day. It's a practice. Yoga, down dog. That's part of like what we do when we pray. So there's for me, that's just become a consistent grounding in my day. And I'm really happy with that. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I just say is another part of I'd say Middle Eastern culture, which I'm I don't know if this is, but to me it feels like Middle Eastern culture is this having a very strong social fabric. I love having such a big family on both sides, cousins galore, and then friends from literally a variety of different phases of my life that when I reconnect with, it's like we were just hanging out yesterday, and some of these people I haven't seen maybe for 5 or 10 years. There's a strong social fabric, which is beautiful. I think that is a beautiful part of our culture that I want to maintain in London, hopefully over the years, or try to recreate in London.
It sounds from what you've said that community and camaraderie is a very big part of the inner wellness that you have found and are continuing to maintain, be that in a social setting, familial, and in not necessarily a very familiar one with something like the Mankind Project, but it's still very much a community feel, 100%. Right? It's people 100%. Who are getting together, 100%. Who are opening their hearts and their minds and their souls to one another, and seeing and being seen. And that, I think, is so much a part of our wellness and feeling grounded, alongside, as you said, these daily practices that we keep in mind and to keep us going and to remind us of being embodied and being present, and that there's a bit of a forward motion, however small it may seem at the time, bit by bit, step by step, you can go a really long way. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thanks, Omar.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Check out the show notes for more details about my wonderful guests, including where you can find them on social media. If you enjoyed listening to this, please do spread the good word, share with friends, family, cousins, and colleagues, and please, please, please like and leave a review on whatever platform you are listening to this podcast. Your support is crucial for the show's success, and a couple of clicks from you will mean the world to me. Go to my website, leilamaghrabi.com, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter for more news on future episodes.